In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
The creation of Glooscap. After the Micmac world was created and after the animals, birds, and plants were placed on the surface, Creator caused a bolt of lightning to hit the surface of Wisquimic. This bolt of lightning caused the formation of an image of a human body, which is Glooscap, first shaped out of the basic element of the Micmac world, sand. Creator unleashed another bolt of lightning, which gave life to Glooscap. But he could not yet move. He was stuck to the ground, watching the world go by, and Naku set travel across the sky every day. His head was facing the direction of the rising sun, and his feet were in the direction of the setting sun, and his right hand pointed north, and his left hand was in the south direction. Glooscap watched the animals and the birds and the plants grow and pass around him, and he asked Kisuulk to give him freedom to move about the Micmac world. So it was with this third blast of lightning came and caused Glooscap to become free and to be able to move and to stand on the surface of the earth. After Glooscap stood on his feet, he turned around in a full circle 7 times, and he then looked towards the sky and gave thanks to the Creator for giving him life. And he looked down and gave thanks to Wisquimic for offering its sand for his creation, and he looked within himself and gave thanks to Kisuulk for giving him his soul and his spirit. And Glooscap then gave thanks to the 4 directions, starting in the direction of sunrise and following the sun east, south, west, and north. And he gave his heartfelt thanks to the 7 directions. Glooscap then went out to explore Wisquimic to see what he might learn about where he lived, and he traveled in the direction of the setting sun until he came to an ocean. When he then went south until the land narrowed and he could see 2 oceans on either side. And he journeyed back to where he started from and continued towards the north. This is a selection from a Micmac creation legend. They're talking about the creation of their god, Glooscap. So the Micmac, legend or whatever, the creation of Glooscap.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
All right, everybody, welcome. Greetings and welcome to the American Sermon. I'm John Towers, and this is a limited series spun off from my podcast called The Abracast. And you can find The Abracast wherever you get your podcasts from. We're literally everywhere. And if you like the topics like these, or like from the parts 1 and 2, I would highly recommend it to you. I think we're going to get right into this. I think there's an amazing amount of evidence these days that there were multiple crossings from every direction into ancient North America. everyone from the ancient Romans to the Chinese. We certainly know the Vikings were in Canada for sure. The Romans to the Chinese probably landed here at one time or another, and I'm very intrigued by the idea of American copper being used all over the world in the Bronze Age. And tonight we are gonna talk about that a little bit. That creeps in a little bit with the Phoenicians and all this. Tonight we are going to talk about one or two of these ancient crossing, these ancient discoveries of America. I'm not sure how I'm going to call it. Pre-Columbian discoveries of America. So I'm just going to roll with it for right now. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the idea that the Knights Templar discovered America. So going forward, I feel like I should say that this is a little bit too close to like modern History Channel TV shows for me. And I usually don't wander off into this area at all, but I think that this fits into the larger story of the American sermon. So the featured books that we're going to be reading from tonight. Also, I love that Micmac story that I found about him crossing the oceans and stuff. I think that is really cool, and that's going to come to bear towards the end. The featured books for this evening, they're a little bit newer than I'm used to highlighting or featuring. The Hiram Key, Pharaoh's Freemasonry, and the Discovery of the Secret Scrolls of Jesus by Knight and Lomas. This is from 1996. I own a bunch of these Knight and Lomas books too. I own like 4 of them, I think. The article was Glooscap, a Scot. An article we're going to get into is called was Glooscap a Scot from Atlantic Insight, 1983. You can find a bunch of stuff about this story on the ClanSinclairUSA.org. And then we're going to dabble in a little bit. We're going to crack open for the first time in the American Sermon, The Secret Destiny of America by Manly P. Hall. So, I mean, are we ready? Let's go. I'm going to assume that you guys know a little something about the Templars. I'm going to briefly do a summary of it, but there's so much information out there. But I imagine if you're listening to a podcast like this, hopefully you have like some kind of working knowledge of it. If not, here we go. In case you've been living under a rock since Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade came out, the Templars were this Catholic military order that was founded right after the First Crusade. And they were founded to protect pilgrims in the Holy Land. It's interesting. I recently did an Origin of the Templars episode, and I found evidence that they didn't just protect Christian pilgrims; they were also helping Muslims in the land. That's interesting. There's a whole thing about it. But basically, if you were traveling in the Holy Land, they were going to protect you. They started out as like 9 dudes, and they eventually turned into like the world's first multinational corporation. They originally were living in the temple, what they said was the Temple of Solomon, and there are all these theories and rumors that they found some sort of secret, like the Ark of the Covenant or the fucking Holy Grail, or like the secret of Gnosis, and so on and so forth. We're gonna get into a pretty interesting theory of what the secret might have been. They were like special forces or like tank units of their time. They wore white tunics with capes with blood red crosses emblazoned on them. And they became super wealthy. What they would do is, part of the way that they decided to protect these pilgrims instead of protecting them by killing everybody that attacked them, what they would do is they would basically make them worthless. So you would go to a Templar commandery where you're in somewhere near the destination you were leaving from. So you would go to the Templar commandery in Paris, or in Languedoc, or wherever, and you would give them your money, and they would give you basically what amounts to like a traveler's check or something. It's a secret coded document, and then you would take that on the road with you. So if these raiders would take your stuff, it would be useless to them. Like they couldn't use it. But so along the way, you stop at like the different Templar commanderies or checkpoints, and you would be able to update your account, get a couple dollars. They would change the code on like your receipt or whatever. You would have a couple dollars in your pocket. You could go and spend them, and then be on the road again until you reach the next commandery. So this is the way that they became like the first bankers. So a lot of there are theories out there that Templars went on to form or to take over in some fashion Switzerland. You look at the flag of Switzerland and it's like white and a red cross. They're like, man, that looks really fucking familiar. And like, these guys were the first international bankers, and now we got Swiss bank accounts. So I think that that's super interesting. And a lot of people are like, well, how did only a small amount of knights at the beginning protect, all these pilgrims? And I don't know. That's a good fucking question. But this is the way they eventually did it. And, I don't know what the rules of usury were to these Catholics or whatever, but eventually they used this and they got super rich. And they were instrumental in all of the Holy Land Crusades, except for the first one, because they weren't founded yet. They were founded after Jerusalem fell. The Battle of Ascalon that was the last major battle. So Jerusalem fell, and then they were trying to protect from a counterattack. And they did a battle of Ascalon they met the counterattack before they were ready and fucked those guys up. And then after that, a few of the knights from the First Crusade were still hanging around, and they're like, you know what? Let's start this new order. That's basically the way it started. In 1307, they were rounded up on charges of heresy and tortured, and some of them were burned at the stake. So these Templars that were in France got the worst of it. Almost all the stake burning business was in France. Elsewhere, they were let go for the most part, and reportedly, a large percentage of the knights and most of their fleet escaped. Some say they went to other military orders like the Hospitallers. And some say that they went to Scotland to help Robert the Bruce win independence from England at the Battle of Bannockburn, and some disappeared. And as one theory goes, they never stopped being Templars. They simply went underground, and their traditions and whatever secrets they had became intertwined in these noble aristocratic families, and they became intertwined into these secret societies. Some say they founded Freemasonry to hide these secrets, which would make it, I don't know, so this is linked right to the first two episodes in some way. This is very often, or this is a very oversimplified summary. All right, I get it, I know. We're not getting into what their heresy actually was or the politics revolving around their persecution. For our story, it makes little difference whether they were Catholics, whether they were Gnostics, whether they were goddess worshippers, whether they actually worshipped the devil and kissed his butthole, whether they had the head of John the Baptist, or, they call him John the Baptizer nowadays, or even, whenever we talk about the Templars, I always say this to wind people up, because there's a lot of in my opinion, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that they're actually crypto Muslims. But whatever their heresy was, it just doesn't matter with our story. This is not what we're talking about. When it's all said and done, we're not talking about their beliefs. We're not talking even about their culture. We're talking about we're talking about their logistics, right? So I'm going to flip over to this book called The Hiram Key by Knight and Lomas. Let's see. So they are picking up their part of the story after the persecution of the Templar. So this is 1307 and older. We're going forward. Whilst the Grand Master was being crucified. So this book, this Hiram Key, and they have another one, I think it's called The Second Messiah. What they're talking about is the Templar Grand Master actually, when he was being questioned, they actually crucified him in the cell that he was being held in. And they go on to explain how this is actually where the image of Christ comes from, was from this Templar, and this is actually where the Shroud of Turin comes from. The actual Shroud of Turin is actually some kind of chemically photographed imprint of this Grand Master that was crucified. It's all fascinating. It's all fascinating stuff. However, that's not what this episode of the podcast is about. Many Templars had slipped the net. A large part of the Templar fleet had been in harbor at the Atlantic seaport of La Rochelle. And they must have been tipped off or picked up some rumors, for as the sun rose up on the morning of Friday the 13th, October 1307, they would be, the would-be arresting guards would come to see only water where the fleet had been tied up the night before. The ships of the order were never seen again, but their battle flag, the skull and crossbones, was dun dun dun. We now need to establish what happened to those Templars that managed to escape the clutches of King Philip. From our investigations, we found that their presence can be detected in two places soon after the escape: Scotland and America. We cannot be sure from the surviving... You're like, what? You cannot be sure from the surviving evidence, but stories persist of Templar ships going to Scotland and to Portugal. Well, we know that they went to Portugal now. That's been pretty established. The fleet could have visited both refuges in turn, but it seems more probable to us that they divided as soon as they left port, with one section heading towards Scotland and the remainder sailing to the northern tip of a friendly Portugal to stock up with provisions. When I talk about provisions, I'm talking about these plastic indestructible bottles of gin that I buy. From there, they were set on a voyage that had often been discussed, but due to commitments in the Holy Land, they were never undertaken. They pointed their bows exactly due west and set sail on what is now the 42nd parallel in search of the land marked with the star that they knew from the Nazarene scrolls was called America. So these Nazarene scrolls, we're going to get into it in a little bit more detail later, but is what Maxon or what Knight and Lomas thinks they found under the temple. It's like these charts and maps to get to the Holy Land, and they were originally discovered by these Phoenicians that went to go mine to get natural resources from America, which ties into, the barren copper mines in Michigan and so forth. Okay, which these French knights referred to as La Murica, a name that later simply became America. They almost certainly landed in Cape Cod or Rhode Island area of New England in the early weeks of 1308, setting foot in the New World Order nearly a century and a half before Christopher Columbus was even born. This is a strong claim, but irrefutable evidence is already in existence to show that the Templars did reach America, settled there, and that they carried out journeys to and from Scotland. In a small town of Westford, Massachusetts, there is an image of a knight carved as a series of punched holes into the slabbed rock. Now, the famous knight can be seen to be wearing a helmet and the habit of a military order, and the sword shown in the weathered carving has been identified as having a pommel hilt in the style of European knights of the 14th century. But for us, this is also, keep this engraving in mind. If you've never seen it, Scott Walter did some stuff with it in his old History Channel show or whatever. And there's some interesting illustrations of it online and pictures of it you could find. The weathered carving that had been identified as a pommel hilt, okay, the 14th century. So this is going to come up later also, but it's going to be a little bit older or a little bit younger than what they're talking about, than what Knight and Lomas is talking about here. But for us, the most fascinating feature is the shield, which has a clear and simple design upon it. It depicts a single-mast medieval vessel sailing west towards a star. At Newport, Rhode Island, there is a second European monument, a puzzling tower, which also Scott Walter has done a lot of work on, constructed in the style of Templar round churches. So here's another thing that I think I should touch on real quick. I'm actually not going to fucking touch on it. I'm not going to get into the fucking these round churches and all this stuff. I'm going to sound like a crazy person by the end of the night. It has been described as having a typically Romance-esque architecture detail in the pillars and the arches, and its dating puts its strange tower right into the century that saw the Templar fleet disappear. It was also probably a multi-purpose building for the new colonists, serving as a church, a watchtower, a lighthouse. A lot of people actually say it's actually a windmill. There is no doubt that the building is extremely old, because on a map of 1524, recording the European discovery of the coastline, Italian navigator Giovanni di Verenziano marked the location of the Newport Tower as an existing Norman villa. These finds are very powerful indicators of a Templar presence in the New World, but alone they are not conclusive. However, we already knew that Roslyn Chapel provides evidence that is beyond debate. I think we're gonna touch on that later too. Well known is a place where the Templars congregated after the attack by King Philip and the Pope. This elaborate building took some 40 years to build and was completed in the early 1480s by Oliver Sinclair, which predates Christopher Columbus's arrival in America by several years. Columbus made his first New World landing on the morning of 12 October 1492 on an island in the Bahamas, which Columbus named San Salvador. His first mainland landing was not made until August 1498, when he arrived in South America. So this Oliver Sinclair, we should try to remember this dude's last name, because it's going to become pretty prominent whenever you talk about these Templars, and especially when you start talking about Roslyn Temple or Roslyn Chapel and all this stuff. All these Sinclairs just fall out of the woodwork of these stories. When considering these comparative dates, it is extremely instructive to look at the carved decoration of the chapel, because the apparent impossibility is evident. As stated earlier, the archways and ceilings of Roslyn Chapel have corn cobs or Indian maize and aloes carved into them as decorative devices. These are two plants that the Scots had no right to know about, let alone illustrate so accurately. Corn was extensively cultivated in all its present forms by the Indians of the North and South America. But it is still believed to have been unknown outside the New World before 1492. Which, I mean, if we're going to be real about this, the carvings that they say are corn and aloe, I'm not sure if it's corn and aloe. I've seen corn before. I've shucked corn before. And I'm not sure on it. Also, this sort of speaks against all these early discoveries of America, doesn't it? I mean, if you find something as fucking awesome as corn is and not take it back to where you live to plant it there, you know what I mean? Think about everyone that's hungry. They would think and corn's pretty hardy. I think corn could grow pretty much in a lot of places. I'm not going to say everywhere, but a lot of places. So I don't know. That's just something to think about. Try to keep these things in the context. According to the official history, seed grains of Indian maize were first brought to Europe and Africa by the 16th century explorers and eventually thrived throughout most of the world. So like I said, to me, this is kind of evidence against. I'm doing an episode about ancient discoveries of America, and all I can think about is that what's wrong with it? I gotta find my place. These carved plants are very much an integral part of the fabric of the chapel, and they must have been started some years before the completion of the buildings. So we have certain evidence that the men that instructed the masons at Roslyn Chapel must have visited America at least a quarter of a century before Columbus. In the light of such solid evidence, we can accept the Westford Knight and the Newport Tower for what they are, Templar remains in what is today the United States of America, the land of the star called La Merca. Sorry about that. Before leaving the subject of the first European landings in the New World, we would like to explain why it became our firm conviction that the continent of America took its name not from the also-ran explorer Amerigo Vespucci, but from the star of the west called Merca, which the Nazareans from the scroll that they found believed was the marker of a perfect land across the ocean of the setting sun. Not only did we have the evidence of the true source of the name, but we found that we had an old explanation easy to disprove. The explanation of this Amerigo Vespucci character. The standard historical line that is routinely trotted out on the origin of the name of the New World comes entirely from a silly misunderstanding by an obscure clergyman who never ventured more than a few miles from the monastery of Saint Diodantus in the Vosges Mountains in the Duchy of Lorraine on the French-German border. This is a very enthusiastic priest, had a passion for geography and a deeply meaningful names. He had given himself the highly imaginative pseudonym of, High Lacomylus, which is a Greek word, the Latin for lake and the Greek for mill, which was eventually translated back to the German to create the family name of Waldensmuller. All right, anyhow, this guy fucked something up, and he renamed, he gave a fake meaning or fake origin for the name America, and he attributed it to this Italian explorer named Amerigo Vespucci, something like that. And he was wrong. And he wound up printing a book that everyone bought. And to this day, that's the official name. That's the official origin of the name. Let's see. This book was written 15 years after the official Columbus discovery of the New World and exactly 200 years after the Templars first landed there. In either case, it seems silly to assume that nobody had given this continent a name before this German monk started writing the book called The Introduction to the Cosmography, or such a non-sailor would have had the audacity to assume that he had the right to Christian a new quadrant of the globe. Waldensmuller got the name right, but the explanation wrong. His personal inclination for meaningful names misled him. The power of the printing press ensured that his error was transmitted widely. In a very short space of time. Very shortly after he had written these works, he realized his great mistake and publicly retracted his assertion that Amerigo Vespucci was the discoverer of the New World, but by then it was too late. People had an explanation that seemed to make some sort of sense. It was a classic case of history, to paraphrase Henry Ford, becoming bunk. Once a convention is accepted, it takes an intellectual dynamite to shift it. The accident myth of Vespucci is a cultural folklore in American education system, but those that really want to understand America and the forces that created the modern United States need to follow the evolutionary chain of Nazarene thinking.
Learn more at theabracast.com. Get graphic elements, notes, worksheets, and text versions of selected episodes, as well as access to the private Abracast workgroup by signing into the mailing list. Get all that, plus exclusive episodes, by supporting the show and becoming a subscriber at subscribestar.com.
So this all this L'America star business reminds me of Manly P. Hall's Secret Destiny of America, which you're going to talk about for a moment. He has this chapter where he's talking about the Western Ocean travel to the earthly paradise, and he's going on and on about all these metaphors for the continent of America being hidden in Greek myth, which is very fascinating. He says, the Greek mythology perpetuates the knowledge of a blessed land beyond the western boundaries of ocean. In this blessed land dwelt Hesperides, the beautiful daughter of night. And here also, at the end of each day, the sun came to rest. In popular mythology, Hesperic Isles were a kind of terrestrial paradise. Thus, under a thin veil of mystic symbolism was concealed the account of the Western continent, of great size, fertile and rich, and abounding in all good things. The ancients believed that the earth to be surrounded by a sphere of constellations, and that they were assigned to each country, where the star groups which were above that country's particular area of land. In the arrangement perceived in the writings of Adius of Soli, the constellation of the eagle spreads its wings across the North American continent. The serpent winds its coil over Mexico and Central America, and the dragon floats in the sky above Japan and China. Perhaps Sir Edward Landseer was not far wrong when he declared that the symbols of nations and the emblems peculiar to their heraldry originated in the ruling constellations. Just about everyone knows the constellation of the Great Bear is in the sky over Russia, and since time immemorial, the bear that walks like the man has been the accepted symbol of the Russian state. Thus, in many ways, we discover indications that the old races were wiser than we thought, in that what we have called discoveries are really only rediscoveries. So I have made it very clear that astrology and astronomy are not really my bag, baby. I was just in a discussion on social media about this very thing. And when we were doing the tarot card episodes on the Abercast, I was fascinated with the astrological tie-ins to the cards, which is where this conversation actually came from. However, I do know that there is this. Okay, so the eagle constellation that he's talking about is Aquila the eagle. It's this eagle that held Zeus's thunderbolts. He also, I think, kidnapped somebody. He kidnapped he kidnapped Zeus's grandson or something, Ganymede. Anyhow, he's holding Zeus's thunderbolts, and this made me think of the Great Seal. In the Great Seal, there's an eagle, and in his right talon, do they have sharp talons? In his right talon, he's holding an olive branch, and in his left talon, he's holding arrows. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Also, I happen to know, because a long time ago I did an episode about Ophiuchus, the constellation Ophiuchus, which is the serpent wrestler. As some people think he's the missing 13th zodiac sign. So I know that Aquila and Ophiuchus are both in the Hercules. They're both they call it the Hercules grouping. So the serpent that's winding its way, over Mexico or whatever, and Aquila the eagle are very close together. So, I mean, if any of you guys are constellation junkies and want to weigh in on this, I would love to get a little bit more information on it. So please help a brother out if you can. So this is the theory, is that at the times of King Solomon, these Phoenicians from Tyre mapped out the way to get to North America, and they were using the journey here for building materials and stuff, I guess. So this information is the secret treasure or whatever that the Templars found under the Temple of Solomon, and they found these navigation charts and this location for America. And when they went into hiding, they used these charts to flee from their persecution. Like between 30 and 40 years passed, and this dude from the Sinclair family, Henri Sinclair, whose family had been tied up in this Templar business, supposedly dating back to Hugh de Payenne in the First Crusade. So this dude, Henry Sinclair, has found or has left this secret location, and he knows how to get to North America. And this information is otherwise conveyed to him, probably through some kind of function of the now disbanded and underground and Knights Templar organization, since they were the ones in the possession of this information in the first place. So now we're going to get into the second part of the story. The story of this underground Knights Templar, Henry Sinclair, Prince Henri Sinclair. So, if you look through enough Templar research, this Sinclair name becomes unescapable. This family is the family that built the Rosslyn Temple, that has we're calling it corn and aloe decorative devices that are somehow integral to the part of the the building of the temple. And they were made famous by Dan Brown, right? That's why everyone knows what Rosslyn Temple is. Since we touched on it in the Hiram key reading, it brings this whole thing together. Who was Prince Henri Sinclair? He was born in Scotland on or around 1345. Henry Sinclair became the Earl of Rosslyn, as well in the surrounding islands, as well as Prince of Orkney, the Orkney. It's believed that in 1398 he led an expedition to explore Nova Scotia and Massachusetts. This was 90 years before Columbus, quote, discovered, unquote, America. Prince Henri I keep saying Henri. I'm just going to say Henry. Prince Henry Sinclair was the subject of historian Frederick J. Paul's Atlantic Crossing Before Columbus, which was published in 1961. Not all historians agree with Paul, but he made a highly convincing case that this blonde, sea-going Scot, born at Rosslyn Castle near Edinburgh in 1345, not only wandered about mainland Nova Scotia in 1398, but he also lived among the Micmacs long enough to be remembered through centuries as the man-god Glooscap. Remember the cold open where Glooscap goes to where he started across the oceans and came back home? Henry Sinclair's ancestry is a mixture of Norman and French, Norwegian, and Scottish. The first Sinclair known in what is now the United Kingdom had arrived with William the Conqueror in 1066. Sinclair's family, a friend of Robert the Bruce, the King of Scotland, died fighting the Saracens in Spain in 1330. His father, Sir William Sinclair, also died in battle while fighting the Lithuanians from a base in Prussia. In 1358, Henry was 13 at the time, and he was trained in martial exercises with sword, spear, bow, and arrow. And he spoke Latin and French and became a knight at the age of 21 years. He held the position of a Grand Master of Scottish Masons. This is another way that it's tied in, that they're tying this into the Templars. His first wife, who died young, was a great-granddaughter of King Magnus of Sweden and Norway. His second wife, Janet Halliburton, Dick Cheney, of Dyerleton Castle, bore him 13 children. Sinclair was installed as the Earl of Orkney and the Lord of Shetland when he was 24. The earldom included Faroes and the Orkneys and the Shetlands. Norway had ruled the islands since the 9th century as a jarl. He was next to royalty. He had the authority to stamp coins and to make laws and remit crimes and wear a crown and have a sword carried before him. And he had already been rewarded by King David of Scotland for a successful raid into England, and the title of Lord Sinclair and the position of Lord Chief Justice of Scotland. Sinclair excelled in a furious time. Before he was 35 years old, he'd built up a fleet larger than Norway's, and Norway was by then hard pressed to defend itself from Baltic pirates. Still, he brooded over his lack of guns. The new technology had been developed among naval powers in Mediterranean areas and was effective for Carlo Zeno, the Lion of Venice, whose the brothers Carlo Zeno and Niccolo Zeno and Antonio Zeno, who first joined Prince Henri in his maritime explorations. This first assignment was to chart the ocean to the west, and their Zeno map of the sea was so accurate that mariners used it for the next 150 years. Niccolo and Antonio had the practice of writing to Carlo the Lion in Venice. So these two brothers were writing the third brother. Niccolo and Antonio Zeno were writing to Carlo. in this correspondence that was eventually published in 1558. Historians called it the Zeno narrative, and is basically the source of Pohl's intriguing account. So these guys were writing their brother, and somehow whatever happened in 1558, these letters were published. And in these letters, they explained how they went with Henri Sinclair to the New World. This Zeno narrative told about a survey to make a map of Greenland in 1393, and it was conducted by Niccolo Zeno and later by Prince Henry's ships. Not only did the Zeno map chart the sea with uncanny precision, it also showed certain landmarks. For example, it illustrated two cities in Esto-Laurentia, Nova Scotia, possibly founded by Sinclair. Esto, I believe, is a star. Estes, that's the Minotaur's name, right? And the Minotaur was named after a star. Lilandra, the land of the star, I think. I should run upstairs and ask my wife. Possibly founded by Sinclair. Louisburg Harbor and St. Peter's, a castle or fortification was shown. There was a speculation that Zeno based this map on a much more ancient map coming from the Templars in the Middle East. That's the Nazarene scrolls they're talking about right here. And this article, I believe, was written in 1983 maybe? I can't remember. I don't feel like stopping to go look. Carried in secrecy for them in safekeeping in Roslyn Temple until Prince Henry commissioned its update by Zeno. The Zeno narrative reported that as far back as 1371, 4 fishing boats, the fishermen were Prince Henry's subjects, were blown. We could just end that sentence right there. Booyah! See you later. Good night. That was a great episode. Thank you. No, I'm sorry. The fishermen were Prince Henry's subjects were blown off so far out to sea that they eventually came ashore on land that was probably Newfoundland. And they spent more than 20 years on the island, apparently on the land to the south. And then one of them made contact with some European fishermen and managed to return to the Faroes. Sinclair decided to explore these new lands and set sail around April 1st, 1398. His fleet consisted of 12 little vessels appearing much like Viking ships. And Zeno document suggests dropping the anchor on the 1st June in Guysborough Harbor in Nova Scotia. Sinclair then sent 100 soldiers to explore the source of smoke they saw swirling above a distant hill. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Apparently, Sinclair persuaded Native Americans, the Micmac Indians, to act as guides in his exploration of what he first thought to be an island. The narrow isthmus at Bear Verte changed his mind and was navigatable by canoe to Cumberland Basin with a portage on only 3 miles. The trip along the River Herbert towards Passborough included only one portage of 400 yards. In the 22 miles, Sinclair may have traveled to Annapolis Basin and across the Micmac canoe route to Liverpool. By October, he was back in the Green Hill sector of Pictou Harbor to attend a gathering of the Micmacs. Whenever I say or hear the word Micmac, all I could think about is Herman Munster in fucking Pet Cemetery. Talk about the Micmac Indians. Micmacs. All right, here's this gathering. 'Twas the time for holding the great and yearly feast with dancing and merry games. Next, he doubled back to Spencer Island, Minas Canal, and then he did some hunting. The meat of the animals was sliced and dried. The bones were chopped up, boiled in a big iron pot. To extract the marrow, his winter campsite was on the high promontory of Camp Dior. overlooking Advocate Harbor. During the winter, the expedition built a ship, and when spring arrived, Sinclair sailed away from Nova Scotia. Come sail away with me. They traveled southward along the New England coast to the Merrimack River, just north of Boston, where they lost their cockies. The party landed and spent winter living peacefully with the Indians. To the west, they could see a hilltop accompanied by 100 men, and Henry marched inland to the summit of this hill, now called Prospect Hill, located in Westford, Massachusetts. It's about 465 feet in altitude and afforded a view in all directions. While in this area, one of Prince Henry's lifelong companions by the name of Sir James Gunn, also from Scotland, died. In memory of their lost companion, the party carved a marker on the face of a stone ledge, and it consisted of various sizes of holes punched an outlined Scottish knight with a 39-inch longsword and a shield bearing the Gunn clan insignia, which, you'll remember, the Hiram Key is a boat sailing towards a star. Where glacial scratches and rock colorations existed, they were incorporated into the man-made design. Some holes were larger and deeper than others. It's the story of my life. During probably due to the dulling of the carver's tool and centuries of weathering. Skipping ahead a little bit. While we were at anchor there, the month of June came in, and the air in the island was mild and pleasant beyond description. To the harbor, we gave the name Trin. After 8 days, the 100 soldiers returned and brought word that they had been through the island and up to the hill, and that the smoke was a natural thing proceeding from a great fire in the bottom of the hill, and that they were there, and that there was a spring from which issued a certain substance like pitch, which ran into the sea, and the whereabouts dwelt a great many people, half wild and half living in caves. Support for the Xenu document's account of Sinclair's itinerary in 1398 lies in Silas Terrellius Rand's, quote, Legend of the Micmacs, unquote. Rand wrote down the famous legends compiled in the English Micmac dictionary of 40,000 words and translated most of the Bible into Micmac. He was self-educated, and he saved an entire oral literature from probable oblivion. We learn from Rand that from Charles Linlid, a contemporary in New England, that Glooscap, like Sinclair, was, quote, a leader who came from the east far across the great sea. And he was a prince, and he was a king who sailed there, and his home was in a large town or island, and he came with many soldiers. And he came across the ocean via Newfoundland, and first met the Micmacs at Pictou. His chief weapon was a sword of sharpness, and he had 3 daughters. His character was unusual. The Micmacs described Glooscap as sober, grave, and good. He seemed to have been, on the whole, a noble-minded, generous personage. Sinclair, unquote. Sinclair, accordingly to the Xenu document, had similar qualities of character. He was, quote, prince as worthy of immortal memory as any that had ever lived, for his great bravery and remarkable goodness, unquote. There's further evidence supporting the claim that Prince Henry Sinclair visited the North American continent. Charles Godfrey Leland, the author of the Algonquin Legends of New England, and John Daney, a professor at Columbia University and author of various articles on Algonquin dialect, combined their talents to write a book entitled Kluskap, the Master, and other Algonquin poems in 1902. His remarkable achievements carry many symbolic messages which are meaningful to us today, and he had the skill and the courage to sail to the ends of the earth in pursuit of his beliefs and to establish peaceful relations with the people he encountered. Henry was admired and his leadership was followed. Since he did not seek personal fame, his accomplishments have never slipped from view. So there is a continuation of this theory that Columbus, a lot like Henry Sinclair, also had this insider info. And a big deal is made of the Nina and the Pinta and the Santa Maria and their white sails with red crosses, linking this voyage to the Templars as well. Which, you know, he was sailing out of Spain, which was a hotbed of Templar activity. Before Ferdinand and Isabella in the Spanish Inquisition. There might be some smoke there, I guess. So this topic is, like I said, way closer to the modern History Channel programming that I usually get into, but I think it's a fun story, and a part of this idea made it into my latest graphic novel. Actually, a ton of this material did. The Ages. You know, what do you guys think about this theory? Is it more than just a plot to a Nicolas Cage movie? I don't know. I'm anxious to know what you guys think of this stuff. You think it holds some weight? You think it's got some gravitas? So that's been the show. Thank you guys very much. Don't forget to hit up the website, abercast.com, if you want to unpack some of these topics. Head to the feature topic link, and there are some episodes about the Muslim expansion. If you want to know more about this Catherine and Isabella and the Spanish Inquisition business that we talked about. Another section, the First Crusade, section. Specifically the origin of the Templars and all of that stuff. And then also, there's an episode in the general occult section called it's called Baphomet, the Sabbatic Goat of Mendes, which is where we talk a little bit about the heresy of the Templars. And then there are 2 Secret Destiny of America episodes. There are 2 in the Freemason section. And I think that's it. Probably in the occult section, I think there's still an episode called Ophiuchus, the Serpent Wrestler. It might be up there still. Social media links are at the bottom of the page. Sign into the newsletter for bonus content. Grab a shirt. Check out my books. If you like these shows so far, I might want to check out my latest graphic novel, The Ages. Thank you guys for tuning in. Everybody, don't forget about the American Sermon. You can find it in a lot of good places, a lot of good pod places. If you're whatever pod catcher you pay attention to, whether it be like iHeartRadio or whatever, you can't find it and you don't want to download another one just to catch a show. Remember, you can always go to our iTunes our fucking YouTube channel. You go to our YouTube channel, the show gets put up there the day it gets published. So there is that. And don't forget about our Vessel of the Art giveaway. Right now, all you have to do is like our Facebook page, the Abercast Facebook page, and sign into the newsletter, and you're registered to win the sweet-ass mason jar and some other swag. And the mason jar has the Abercast logo on it. Again, it's called the Vessel of the Art giveaway. We're going to be doing announcing the winner on March 20th and another one on April 17th on a go live on the Abercast Facebook page. So check us out there. We're rolling out these go lives and we're doing it often. We're doing them often. It is an apprentice in the order of the Abercast who now wishes to receive more light by passing to the degree of the fellow craft. He is prepared, worthy, and well qualified, and he is vouched for. Let him enter in the name of the Lord and be received in due form. Welcome to the Abracast. I'm John. Check out this preview for this Fellowcraft episode. To hear the whole episode, head over to Subscribestar and join the Fellowcraft tier. It's only $3. This whole series is available right now. It's 6 parts. Okay? It's 6 parts. It's all about the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. What in the heck are the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, you might ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the history of the Emerald Tablets is strange and beyond belief of modern scientists. Their antiquity is stupendous, dating back some 36,000 years before Christ. The author is Thoth, an Atlantean priest king who founded a colony in ancient Egypt. And he wrote the Emerald Tablets in his native Atlantean language, which was translated by Dr. Michael Duriel. And here we talk about it. We have 6 episodes. It's like 285 minutes of content over at the Fellowcraft tier at Subscribestar. That's almost 5 fucking hours of talking about these tablets. And there's much more. There's many, many more Fellowcraft episodes over there. So enjoy it, and I hope to see you over Subscribestar. Thanks. Harkye, O man, and know of thy bondage. Know how to free thyself from the toils. Out of the darkness shall ye rise upward, one with the light and one with the stars. Follow ye ever the path of wisdom. Only by this can ye rise from below. Ever man's destiny leads him onwards to the curves of infinity's all. Know ye, O man, that all space is ordered. Only by order are ye one with the all. Order and balance are the law of the cosmos. Follow, and ye shall be one with the all. He who would follow the pathway of wisdom open must be the flower of life, extending his conscience out of the darkness, flowing through time and space in the all. Deep in the silence, first ye must linger, until the last of ye free from desire, free from the longing to speak in the silence, conquer by the silence the bondage of words, abstaining from eating until you have conquered desire for food. That is the bondage of soul. It's like the Infinity Gauntlet. Then lie ye down in the darkness. Close ye your eyes from the rays of the light. Enter thy soul force in the place of thine consciousness, shaking it free from the bonds of the night. Place in thy mind, place the image thou desireth. Picture the place thou desirest to see, and vibrate back and forth with thy power. Loosen the soul from out of its night. Fiercely thou shake with all of thy power, until at last thy soul shall be free. Mighty beyond words is the flame of the cosmic, hanging in plains unknown to man, and seeking and balanced, moving in order, music of harmonies far beyond man, speaking with music and singing with color, flame from beginning of eternity's all. Speak of the flame art thou, O my children, burning with color and living with music. Listen to the voices, and thou shalt be free. Consciousness free is fused with cosmic one and the order of the law of the all. Know ye not, man, that out of the darkness light shall flame forth, a symbol of all. Pray ye this prayer for attaining wisdom. Pray for the coming of the light of the all. Mighty spirit of the light that shines through the cosmos, draw my flame closer in harmony of thee. Lift up my fire from out of the darkness, magnet of fire that is one with the all. Lift up my soul, thou mighty and potent. Children of the light, turn not away. Draw me in power to the melt in thy furnace. One with all things and all things in one. Fire of the life strain and one with the brain. With ye have freed thy soul from its bondage. Know that ye the darkness is gone. Ever through space ye may seek wisdom, bound not by fetters, forged in flesh. Onward and upward into the morning, free flash. O soul, to the realms of light. Move thou in order, move thou in harmony. Freely shalt move with the children of light. Seek ye and know ye, my key is wisdom. Thus, O man, ye shall surely be free.
Learn more at theabracast.com. Get graphic elements, notes, worksheets, and text versions of selected episodes, as well as access to the private Abracast workgroup by signing into the mailing list. Get all that, plus exclusive episodes, by supporting the show and becoming a subscriber at subscribestar.com.